You will see those traitors handing down from sire to son the same malignant spirit which they have manifested and which they are now exhibiting with malicious hearts, broad blades and bloody hands in the field against our sons and brothers. That spirit will still remain, and whoever sees the federal government extended over those southern states will see that government in a strange land, and not only in a strange land, but in an enemy's land. A postmaster of the United States in the South will find himself surrounded by a hostile spirit. A collector in a southern port will find himself surrounded by a hostile spirit. A United States Marshal or United States Judge will be surrounded there by a hostile element. That enmity will not die out in a year, will not die out in an age. The federal government will be looked upon in those states precisely as governments of Austria and France are looked upon in Italy at this present moment. They will endeavor to circumvent, they will endeavor to destroy the peaceful operation of this government. Now, where will you find the strength to counterbalance this spirit if you do not find it in the Negroes of the South? They are your friends. They have always been your friends. They were your friends even when the government did not regard them as such. They comprehended the genius of this war before you did. It is a significant fact. It is a marvelous fact. It seems almost to imply a direct imposition of providence that this war, which began in the interest of slavery on both sides, bids fair to end in the interest of liberty on both sides. It was begun, I say, in the interest of slavery on both sides. The South was fighting to take slavery out of the Union, and the North fighting to keep it in the Union. The South fighting to get it beyond the limits of the United States Constitution, and the North fighting to retain it within those limits. The South fighting for new guarantees, and the North fighting for the old guarantees. Both despising the Negro, both insulting the Negro. Yet the Negro, apparently endowed with wisdom from on high, saw more clearly the end from the beginning than we did. Excuse me. The Negro, apparently endowed with wisdom from on high, saw more clearly the end from the beginning than we did. When Seward said the status of no man in the country would be changed by the war, the Negro did not believe him. When our generals sent the underlings in shoulder straps to hunt the flying Negro back from our lines into the jaws of slavery from which he had escaped, the Negroes thought that a mistake had been made, and that the intentions of the government had not been rightly understood by our officers in shoulder straps. And they continued to come into our lines, treading their way through bogs and fens, over briars and thorns, fording streams, swimming rivers, bringing us tidings as to the safe path to march, and pointing out the dangers that threatened us. They are our only friends in the South, and we should be true to them in this their trial hour, and see to it that they have the elective franchise. I know that we are inferior to you in some things, virtually inferior. We walk about among you like dwarfs among giants. Our heads are scarcely seen above the great sea of humanity. The Germans are superior to us. The Irish are superior to us. The Yankees are superior to us. They can do what we cannot. That is, what we have not hitherto been allowed to do. But while I make this admission, I utterly deny that we are originally or naturally or practically or in any way or in any important sense inferior to anybody on this globe. This charge of inferiority is an old dodge. It has been made available for oppression on many occasions. It is only about 6 centuries since the blue-eyed, fair-haired Anglo-Saxons were considered inferior by the haughty Normans, who once trampled upon them. If you read the history of the Norman conquest, you will find that this proud Anglo-Saxon was once looked upon as of coarser clay than his Norman master, and might be found in the highways and byways of old England laboring with a brass collar around his neck, and the name of his master marked upon it. You were down then. You are up now. I'm glad you are up, and I want you to be glad to help us up also. The story of our inferiority is an old dodge, as I have said. For whenever men oppress their fellows, wherever they enslave them, they will endeavor to find the needed apology for such enslavement and impression in the character of the people oppressed and enslaved. When we wanted a few years ago a slice of Mexico, it was hinted that the Mexicans were an inferior race, that the old Castilian blood had become so weak that it would scarcely run downhill, and that Mexico needed the long, strong, beneficent arm of the Anglo-Saxon to extend over it. We said that it was necessary to its salvation and a part of the manifest destiny of this republic to extend our arm over that dilapidated government. So too, when Russia wanted to take possession of part of the Ottoman Empire, the Turks were an inferior race. So too, when England wants to set heel of her power more firmly in the quivering heart of old Ireland, the Celts are an inferior race. So too, the Negro, when he is to be robbed of any right which is justly his, is an inferior man. It is said that we are ignorant. I admit it. But if we know enough to be hung, we know enough to vote. If the Negro knows enough to pay taxes to support the government, he knows enough to vote. Taxation and representation should go together. If he knows enough to shoulder a musket and fight for the flag, fight for the government, he knows enough to vote. If he knows as much when he is sober as an Irishman knows when drunk, he knows enough to vote on good American principles.